I'm Dale Smith for Looney Politics, and it's budget week. And that's also meant a whole lot of speculation around what's going to happen because this is still a minority parliament, and another party is going to have to either abstain or vote with the government in order to ensure that it passes. But a lot of this hand-wringing is frankly wasted effort because the number of choices are particularly limited and based on a certain amount of realpolitik that nobody really wants to quite discuss. Like, for example, the Conservatives are never, ever going to vote for the budget. So I don't know why so much time and effort is spent speculating as to whether they would. As the official opposition, it is their role not to vote for the budget. And not to mention that their demands are pretty much something the government is not able to live with. Not just the deficit cap, which they're suggesting, but also the killing the industrial carbon price, which is part of the signature, as we understand it, of Mark Carney's climate efforts, as questionable as they may be. That kind of leaves the Bloc and the NDP. Now, the Bloc have made a number of non-negotiable demands, which the government tallied up to about $36 billion price tag, and some of which kind of go against things that they have been doing, like demanding increased supplementary pensions for people aged 65 to 75, when the whole point of enriching pensions for people 75 and older is that people have exhausted their savings by that point in some cases and need more support. That's not necessarily a generational inequality, that's quite simply actuarial math. As well, the Bloc are demanding unconditional transfers to provinces, even though we have a whole litany of provinces who have taken federal dollars earmarked for certain things like healthcare or infrastructure and spent them on other things like tax cuts. And in recent years, federal governments have become very averse to simply giving unconditional transfers for that very fact. And that kind of leaves the NDP. Now, the NDP are saying they're going to, not rush to judgment, but they don't want an austerity budget and so on. But there's also this chatter that the NDP are somehow tired of looking like they're propping up the government, despite the fact that we have had for a couple of generations a whole swath of people on the progressive side of the spectrum saying that the best government is always a liberal minority with the NDP to hold them to account. And this goes back so many years that people believe that this is the way to do things because the NDP will ensure that the liberals do the right thing. And what we saw in the last 4 years of the Trudeau government was essentially that the NDP were using their supply and confidence agreement to push things ahead in really bad ways, like dental care. For example, yes, great thing that we've got this program, but it's done in such a way that it's going to be easy for a future government to cancel it rather than using it as it should have been intended in terms of a cost share program between the federal and provincial governments. That would have been more stable and more secure, but they refused to do that. So these are the kinds of things that, the NDP holding the balance of power doesn't necessarily produce the best outcomes. And we don't know that the government will be necessarily open to that kind of cooperation in the future because it created a lot more problems for them than it solved. Particularly because they spent most of those last 3 years dealing with NDP priorities and not those of their own government to their own detriment. So I think to a certain extent, a game of chicken is going to be played. And I've noticed that the government is using the threat of a Christmas election to basically avoid answering questions at this point. Anytime a question is put toward them, it's, I don't know, are you going to force a Christmas election? And that's not a good thing either. On the other hand, I think our biggest danger is not that the government won't make deals with the opposition, but rather that one of the smaller opposition parties, probably the NDP, will start feeling a little too big for their britches and might do something stupid by accident while trying to flex their muscles. And that would be really the biggest danger that we would find ourselves in when it comes time for the budget implementation votes. For Lenny Politics, I'm Dale Smith.